on being elected to be seated in the Assembly of the Graduate Student Government.
Thank you very much.
All right. So now we will move to our next order of business, which is to approve committee charges for all of the committees that that have committee charges to be approved. You should have received those committee charges earlier today. And at this point, I will share my screen with the current committee charges. And we're just going to go in the order that they ended up on this piece of paper, on this Google Doc that I created. So we will begin with the Legislative Affairs Committee. So I think the process by which we're going to do this, we're going to allow the chair of the committee to introduce their committee charge. If they have any words they'd like to say at the beginning, then we'll open it up for debate about additions, subtractions, changes to the committee charges, and then we will hold a vote on what we believe the committee charges should be. So the Legislative Affairs Committee is first on the document, in part because I am the chair of the Legislative Affairs Committee and I was making the document. So it was the easiest one for me to find right off the bat. The Legislative Affairs Committee met and in general, we believed that our goal was to advocate for specific issues at the state and federal level for graduate students. We gave some examples of those specific issues, but we did want to emphasize that these are not the only issues that, as things come up during the year, we will be more than happy to advocate on their behalf. And then we also realized that because our area overlapped with some of the other committees, namely the Local and Civic Engagement Committee, the International Student Affairs Committee, we would be more than willing to work with those committees to identify issues that needed particular attention from the graduate student government. And so you can see the charge as written there. And I'll now open the floor for debate for anyone who wishes to speak on what on anything that they wish to change, talk about, ask questions about on this committee charge. Alec.
Alec Dennis, Businesses Management. One of the things that I just want to bring up, because, and you know, this is an issue that has come up in past GSG assemblies, and you know, I've spoken to a number of members of my graduate program, and we're not particularly, we don't want bullet point A, the right of graduate, we don't want collective bargaining. This is kind of a long simmering, you know, and the fact that there is still disagreement on that particular point within the graduate student body, whereas I don't, or at least I really hope there's not disagreement on the points of increasing access to non-discriminatory healthcare or increasing support for graduate students who are veterans. I personally would be inclined to strike point A of the first part of the Legislative Affairs Committee charge.
I thought you might be. Anyone else comments on that?
I strongly disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that this is definitely a program by program thing, because I've spoken to, at this point, about 20 different members of my graduate program, and not a single one of them wants collective bargaining.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things where I also know that there are other programs out there for whom those proportions would probably be exactly opposite, where all 20 would want collective bargaining. And so this is something that to me is a little bit murky. And one proposal that I might have as a potential compromise, and you know, we can certainly discuss this, is maybe collective bargaining on a school by school or department by department basis. That way those programs which wish collective bargaining can certainly engage in that, and those programs which are disinclined to do so don't need to.
Okay. Yehuda.
Yehuda Katz, Computer Science. I know collective bargaining is popular, but I've spoken to people, I think, in almost every program who do not feel it would be the appropriate direction for students, but they're afraid to speak out because it's an unpopular position. And I would also agree with removing it from the list of bullet points. It doesn't mean that the Legislative Affairs Committee can't advocate for it, because this is a list not limited to these items, but it's probably less divisive if we do not include it.
Okay. Tamara.
I want to clarify that this particular point is not about forming a union. It's not about forming a graduate student union. This is about advocating for rights. So it's the right of graduate students to form a union in the state of Maryland. And I think it's, having just recently learned that graduate students are one of the only state government employees that are not allowed to do this, it's a little fishy to me. And I having heard about other states that have allowed for the unionization of graduate students, it does sound like it is something that has been beneficial to students in those areas. And so while I hear the concerns of my colleagues, I think that it is important to clarify that, again, this isn't, we'd be advocating for the rights of graduate students. And should a union form, it has been beneficial to graduate students in other states.
Okay. Autumn.
Autumn Perky, GPPT. Point of information, I want clarification what collective bargaining is looking like, because one thing that comes to mind is immediately, do we have rights as graduate students for maternity leave? And I don't think we do right now because we're not unionized. And if so, I would have to disagree with Yakuta and Alec and say that I do think this should be included, because I think that should be an important point.
Okay. Janelle.
Yes, I want to, as a member, Janelle Walker, TDPS, I want to echo what my colleagues have said in support of this bullet point. I also understand from others that there might be some disagreement about whether unionizing is desirable. However, two things on that. Of course, not all graduate students will be made to join the union if one forms, right? And that's even if we get to that point. It won't be compulsory joining of the union, of course, right? So of course, if these departments who have a pretty unanimous consent about not unionizing choose not to join the union, that's their choice, right? But I would say that I know for me and for many other representatives in this body, I actually can't uphold the obligation of my position in this body without advocating for this as the number one issue for the Legislative Affairs Committee, because my department has unanimous mandate that this is their number one concern. And I know I'm not alone in that. So I'm just very concerned about my ongoing participation in this body if I can't uphold that number one concern of my constituents.
Daniel.
Yeah, I'd just like to second that. My understanding is that a lot of students I know within the computer science department, that's very much like a number one priority for graduate student government. They see collective bargaining as the number one pathway to get any sort of rights that they want, especially when talking to the university on things like salary, healthcare, things like that. So to take it out seems fundamentally opposed to something about the nature of GSG in my mind.
Alec.
Alec Dennis, Business and Management. Though at the same time, to me, these explicit committee charges should be on things that we all agree on. And while I cannot say that it is the number one concern of my constituents, it certainly is in the top 3 for my constituents, keeping that out. It's something where, to me, there's a lot of tension on this issue. And for something as broad as a committee charge, to me, this should be something that we should focus on, things where there aren't controversy, things that we all, as a collective graduate student entity, can get behind. And I mean, I know in the past we have had, legislative days where basically it has been open for members, for GSG representatives, both in their own individual capacity and as their capacity as department rep, to express their opinion in support of collective bargaining. And I think there's even been some people who have spoken with members of the state, like House or program in one way, shape, or form. So it's not putting it in the explicit charter does not mean you guys can't speak out on this issue. It doesn't even mean that you guys can't speak out on this issue through your official role as GSG rep. It just means that the official Legislative Affairs Committee charge does not include this.
Alexander.
I'd just like to reiterate that, again, this is about having the ability to have this argument, not to collectively bargain to begin with. So I think it should be fairly uncontentious to have there. And in fact, I mean, for one thing, us all agreeing on everything it seems unreasonable. We are a deliberative body, so it seems unrealistic to expect that. And secondly, if in order for each representative to accurately represent their constituents, we need to be able to have this discussion, this argument about collectively bargaining. It has to be predicated on the right to collectively bargain in the first place. So to stymie that goal as a sort of early, I mean, it seems to like be completely against our goals here. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I want to say.
Janelle?
Yes, I want to second much of what Alexander said with regards to us being a deliberative body. I don't think it, frankly, I think it is not equitable or just to allow, certain departments to say, because they're uncomfortable or they're against these mandates, that the entire body has to bend to that when we have the vote for that exact deliberation, right? It's kind of, I think it is counterproductive to this conversation to continue on with this when we have a vote to determine whether or not we want to uphold these charters. We know as a collective body that the right to collectively bargain is, as Alexander said, an important issue. It should be on the table. It should be a priority. So if you disagree with it, that's fine. But we have several votes ahead of us to determine whether or not that's the movement forward. So I think it is more than just to acknowledge the importance of this issue, both for and against.
Viana?
Hello, Viana Newman-Dennis, Art History and Archaeology. I'd like to support the comments from the last two representatives. I see this as being about the right to collectively bargain, as we've said, not necessarily whether we would form a graduate student union right away or in whatever particular form. I do also wonder if we have any survey data on this from any recent years, or if that's something we can do. I mean, I certainly understand that as representatives, we can talk with our constituents, but I wonder if there would be value in issuing an anonymous survey, encouraging every graduate student to respond to maybe several questions related to this issue, just so we can maybe get an even more accurate sense of how the graduate student body is currently feeling about this.
Okay. Alex?
Hello, Alex Franklin from Higher Education, HIED. Yeah, I want to double down on what I think the past two or three people just said, in that we're just arguing, not even arguing, we're talking about giving students a choice to potentially join a union or a collective bargaining organization. The groups who don't want to join are already happy with the current situation because obviously they can't join.
And then even if like we are able to change it, you can continue just choosing not to join. It's the students currently who want to join. They don't even have the option to do what they want, unlike students who don't want to join, they do currently have the option. So we're really just trying to give students the option and give students the choice of if they want to participate in collective bargaining or not. And for us as grad student government to be taking away choice from grad students, I think is completely contradictory to what we're supposed to be doing here.
Laura.
Point of information. So do we have to vote on the committee charges?
Yes, we will be voting on the committee charges. I would imagine that what I might ask Alec to do is to motion to amend the committee charge in the next, when I call on you very next, and then as part of whatever else you're saying, just a motion to amend so that we can actually, then we'll have actually something that we're going to vote on, and then we'll vote on the committee charge as a whole. So Alec.
Alec Dennis, Business Management. I also care about choice. And so that was one of the reasons why I proposed and it like potentially reword it like to the right of the graduate students to collectively bargain if they or their department so chooses, something like that, because there have been graduate programs out there where there have where on a university-wide basis they've enacted collective bargaining and every student is required to join into it, pay fees, etc., even if they don't want to. And so to me, like, I think it would be a great idea if we can have it so that those who want to join a union can, because I recognize that there are programs out there for whom there are, you know, legitimate grievances and a strong desire to unionize, but just so that, you know, those of us who don't want to aren't, our choice is not taken away. So perhaps that could be a way that we can have our cake and eat it too, so that those who wish it can, those who don't wish it aren't forced to.
So does the change on the screen accurately capture your proposed amendment to the committee charge?
We'll let that stand, sure.
Okay. Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Allard, Psych. I want to kind of second what Biana said. I really like her idea about kind of a survey that we could send out to graduate students. I know this is something that we had talked about in our committee meeting, academic affairs committee meeting, having a survey to kind of understand where graduate students are at on certain topics. Because I do feel like I'm hearing a lot of, well, this is where everyone in my department stands, but you know, when you're speaking to someone face to face, you may not be getting the most accurate information. And I think as a social scientist, there is a lot of value in collecting that data. You know, that being said, I think that, you know, that a survey like may be more useful in the future for understanding what unionizing would look like if we had the right to unionize.
Valerie.
First of all, as a member of this committee, I suggest that we go ahead and discuss a survey in our next meeting, because I think it's a great idea. But secondly, I move that we vote to accept the amendment as proposed.
There's been a motion to vote on the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any objection to moving to vote? Hearing none, we'll now vote on the motion to amend. Edie, we don't have a poll ready for this one, right? Because it's an amendment. Okay. If you are in favor of the amendment, if you would please vote yes on the participants tab. If you are opposed to the amendment, if you would please vote no. And if you would like to abstain, if you hit under more, there is a coffee cup emoji that we have been using as abstention.
Can I make a point of order while people are voting?
Sure.
So a discussion of other things to do, like survey the graduate student body, is not in order during debate of this type of motion.
Noted. Okay. If anyone has not yet voted, please do so. If you would like to abstain, Yes, the amendment is just what's in bold on the screen right now. If you would like to abstain, please use the coffee cup reaction. All right, with voting closed, the ayes are 29, the nays are 5, and the abstentions are 1. The motion is agreed to. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns, or changes for the Legislative Affairs Committee charge? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to vote to accept the charge of the Legislative Affairs Committee. Laura McBride.
Motion to vote to accept the charges of the Legislative Affairs Committee.
Second.
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll now vote on whether to accept the entirety of the Legislative Affairs Committee charge. If you would like to accept this charge for the Legislative Affairs Committee, please vote yes. If you would not like to, please vote no. If you would like to abstain, please vote coffee cup. With the time to vote expiring, the yeas are 31, the nays are 0, and the abstentions are 4. The motion is agreed to. We'll now move to the charge for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Would the chair of Diversity and Inclusion like to make any sort of a statement?
Hi, Missy Yang Communication. I am the chair of Diversity and Inclusion. And I don't think I need to say much. I'll say that as a committee, we came together and did our best to articulate all of the things that we think we could best do to support diversity and inclusion efforts by graduate students across the campus. And I invite other committee members to speak if they think there's something in particular that we need to voice. But otherwise, folks are free to read and offer their suggestions.
Great. With that, I'll open debate to any questions, comments, concerns, additions, or subtractions for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee's proposed charge. Rob.
Rob Delka, Physics. Just a point of information on making our presence known within and beyond GSG. Misty, if you're able to maybe speak a little bit on that, what you imagine that point might mean.
I don't think this is a bullet point that I added. If someone on my committee wanted to kind of expand on what they specifically kind of thought about this, but I will say that I think in part it's as a committee member, I've made it a point to let my constituents know that this committee exists, that I am serving on the committee, reaching out to other folks that I see that are doing similar work and letting them know that, oh, there's a committee, please let me know what you're up to, and maybe there's a way that graduate student government can support those efforts. So I guess for me, when I read this, I see it as being a proactive committee member. But if someone else on the committee wants to kind of articulate above and beyond that, please do.
Autumn.
Hi, Autumn, GVBT. I am a committee member on the Diversity and Inclusion with Misty. Misty, I didn't add this point, so I can't clarify much on it. And rereading this now, I question if it's necessary for the charges. And that's the only point I have.
Okay. Anyone else? Yehuda.
So I don't think it takes away anything by having the charge there. Every committee really is supposed to make sure they interact with the necessary people. So it doesn't really make a difference whether it's explicitly there or not. So based on that, I'm motioning to vote.
There's a motion to vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote on the charge of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee? Hearing no objections, we will now vote on the charge of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. If you would like to accept this charge as the charge of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, please vote yes. If you would like to reject this charge, please vote no. If you would like to abstain, please vote coffee cup. With the time to vote expiring, the votes are 37 yeas, no nays, and 1 abstention. The motion is agreed to. Next is the Community Development Committee. Would the chair of this committee like to say anything?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Andrew Mazer, Architecture and Community Planning. So on behalf of the Community Development Committee, we intend to strengthen and support cooperative relationships among the GSG students and the other committees that serve the GSG. So our first point, just for clarification, the name changed from Social and Sport Committee to Community Development Committee. We wanted to nail down the purpose of this committee moving forward to alleviate any further confusion about the purpose of this committee. Want to address things specifically in the light of COVID. Interacting becomes hard. So looking at a virtual platform for events and things of that sort, and specifically addressing some underserved student populations. If there's anything that the committee would like to add, please feel free.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns, additions, or subtractions to the charge of the Community Development Committee?
Motion to vote.
There's been a motion to vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been heard and seconded. Are there any objections to moving to vote? Seeing none, we will now vote on the charge of the Community Development Committee. If you want to accept this charge, please vote yes. If you want to reject this as a charge, please vote no. If you would like to abstain, please vote coffee cup. With the time to vote expiring, the yeas are 34, the nays are 0, and the abstentions are 1. The motion is agreed to. Next up is the Budget and Finance Committee. Would the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee like to say anything?
Yes. So after my committee and I met, we agreed that besides overseeing the budget and informing the assembly about everything that goes on with the budget, our role also entails to serve as financial stewards and to support student organizations through the distribution of event funding requests, and in addition to advising the Vice President of Financial Affairs on what the best steps of the budget would be. And if anybody in my committee wants to add anything, feel free to at this moment.
Great. In that case, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, additions, or subtractions to the charge of the Budget and Finance Committee, speak now.
Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health. Just want a clarification on Vice President for Financial Affairs. That's for the university.
No, for GSG.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So me.
Oh,
so
great.
Yeah.
Yes, it's Ellie advising herself.
It's my committee members advising me.
Yeah, I think that's where my confusion was. No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health, motion to vote.
Second.
There's a motion to vote. Their motion has been heard and seconded. Are there any objections to moving to vote? Seeing none, we'll now vote on the charge of the Budget and Finance Committee. If you accept the charge as it appears in the document, please vote yes. If you would like to reject the charge, please vote no. If you would like to abstain, please vote coffee cup.
Simon, this is Laura McBride, Chemistry. I don't know if this is point of information or something, but there's a typo.
There's a typo.
On the first paragraph, or the second paragraph, the first line, it says next the BCF, I think should be the BFC.
Well, we've already accepted it now, Laura. Ugh, I don't think that anyone will object to us solving that problem. Thank you for catching that. All right. Unless anyone wants to change their vote as a result of that change, Darcy doesn't have the yes or no option on this device. That is true. We did run into that earlier. Yes, Darcy, if you would like to use the thumb raise option, if that's an option that you have. Although I don't see you right now. There you are. Yeah, we'll go with that. In that case, the yeses are 30, the noes are 0, and the abstentions are 0. The motion is agreed to. Next, we have the Student Affairs Committee. The chair of the Student Affairs Committee like to say anything about the proposed charge?
Hi, this is Aldo Gutierrez. I'm the chair from ERIC and the chair of the Student Affairs Committee. So basically what we want to do is just like to be a bridge like among the campus community and the university as a whole. One of the things that we would like to focus for this academic year is mostly just the funding situations for many graduate students, like particularly just like this has been a very disruptive year in terms of research. So I'm just like this, that is basically our priority. And I mean, just like some other members of my committee, I mean, just like we feel that just like the task that the GSG executives have imposed us of creating and distributing the monthly issue of the newsletter might actually prevent us from doing many of the things that we would like to do. So I have another member of my committee, and she told me that she would like to say a few things about this.
Okay.
Hi, that's me. I'm Sophia from Spanish and Portuguese. So yes, when we got together and knew that we needed to create and distribute the monthly issue of the GSG newsletter and saw what it meant, we think that we are concerned that this means that we are just going to be able to do that because it's a monthly issue. And it seems to be quite a lot of work, especially because I think virtually none of our committee has experience doing this. So we were worried that yeah, that we will not be able to focus on the other things that we think are priorities, especially because of the situation of grad students because COVID.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns, additions, or subtractions to the charge of the Student Affairs Committee as it appears? Alec.
Just Alec Dennis, business management. One question: if your committee isn't doing it, then is that something that we just don't think needs to be done, or is that something that needs to be done by someone else?
Hi, Alec. I mean, I think that it should be done by someone else.
Then who would you suggest do that? Because I mean, every committee has their own area of responsibility, and I suppose we could try to voice it on Simon. Here's another job for you. But I know based off of his expression, I just saw on the camera, I don't think he would be exactly enthused by that, and so that's why I'm just I think that's something that needs to be decided upon before we remove that from the Student Affairs Committee purview.
Okay, so I was just like talking to many of the members of my committee. I'm just like, honestly, none of us remembered actually reading the GSG newsletter, so it was actually hard for us to find it throughout our old emails. So really, I mean, I don't know, just like its purpose. I'm just like, to me, it was something new, even though just like I have been a grad student for many years now at UMD. Like honestly, it got lost among the many emails that I received. I don't know, just like if GSG could do without having a newsletter.
If we want to just do without, that's I think a perfectly possible option. I just think that decision is one that we should actively make, not one that should just be passively made without discussion.
No, I agree. I think we should bring it to vote.
Nate, what are point of information? What exactly did we drop? I may have missed a sentence or two, and then we've, I think, used pronouns since.
So the discussion right now, the Student Affairs Committee has suggested that perhaps it is not the correct body to put together, to create and distribute the monthly issue of the GSG newsletter. I will note that it's currently in the charge that they have sent us. So I'm not sure exactly what the goal is here right now. But I just want everybody to be clear that it's currently in the charge. So if we wanted to take it out, it would have to be an amendment to the charge. Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Sink. So I feel like it would be a great disservice to graduate students if we didn't have a newsletter that had information on what it is that we are doing as a body to represent them. I know that before I was, in this body, that was one of my main sources of information for what the graduate student government was doing. And so I think that it, again, would be a huge disservice to get rid of it. That being said, I do have some experience putting together newsletters and putting together graphics. And I can tell you that if you have the right software, it can be a lot easier than you think. And I think that it's something that we as a body can work on collectively. So for example, I can see how it seems maybe like an overwhelming task to accomplish right now. But if, for example, you wanted to publish something in a monthly newsletter that had something about each of the committees and what each of the committees is doing, you can ask us as committees to write whatever it is that we're doing to include. And if we don't have something to include that month, we'll pass, right? There's also really great programs like Canva, which are free online, that have newsletters that are already made, and you just have to pretty much replace your letterhead, add some pictures here and there, and then it doesn't have to be fancy or pretty. It just needs to get the information out to graduate students so that they know what this body is doing to represent them.
Rob.
Rob Delka, physics. I guess 2 points here. One, is there any thing that states that this must be a monthly newsletter? Could it be something that's every 2 months so that it's less work? And the second point is, maybe parallel to Tamara's point, would it be helpful to create an ad hoc committee that sole charge is to distribute this newsletter?
I'm double checking the bylaws right now to see if they say anything about us having to do it monthly, but it does not appear that they say anything about that. So no, there is no bylaw or I also checked the constitutional provision that requires us to do it. So it is at the discretion of the committee or of the assembly to determine what it is they want the newsletter to look like. So, Misty.
Misty Yang Communication. I just had a quick question to clarify. How does this relate to the maintenance of the website, and who maintains the website?
So Edie, our director of operations, does the maintenance of the website.
And just to add to that, so last year, the newsletter was controlled by the VPPR, which was in charge of public relations and design of anything we have to post online. But because we don't have that again, so we moved that to the Student Affairs Committee, since they have like a relationship with the student to get the letter to the student. But if we want to form an ad hoc committee that will be responsible to be producing and distributing the newsletter, that would be also good. But it's a means for us to send out information, because most of our assemblies are only attended by reps. So it's a means for us to send out information like any summary and necessary to reach the population of graduate students. So it's a means for us to do that. So that's another thing to consider.
And I noticed a question in the chat of who does the social media. That is right now taken care of by our chief of staff. So the executive committee is currently doing the website and social media. Viana.
Hi, Viana Newman-Dennis, Art History and Archaeology. I'd like to second what Tamara said, just in terms of making this an easy thing to do, in terms of how we compile information and then actually make it into some sort of document. I'd also like to add, I mean, I think the greatest service we can provide is just simply communicating what GSG specifically is doing. I was looking through a few of the old newsletters, and I find that they would include things that GSG is doing, but then also information that I would get in other emails to graduate students. And it's more for us to put together, and it's more to read through. And so I do think that we should continue to provide this, but I think it should be rather focused on what we are doing as a body.
Nate.
Yes, Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health. I want to quickly apologize if I have been cutting people off, because I realized I've forgotten to raise my hand a few times. I wanted to second the point about possibly considering an ad hoc committee for development of the newsletter, but consider tacking on social media and website development as well, and some sort of essentially outreach committee, or I don't know how we might want to phrase it, but something to that extent, depending on, well, I don't know how much of that, what proportion of that is Edie's role, if you will. So like, if that kind of is everything that he does, I'm sure it's not. And so want to be cognizant of the hours that are committed via Edie's role. And so not like remove all of his tasks, if you will, but to me, it makes the most sense to probably develop a committee for those sorts of communications.
Okay. Rob.
So I'm going to motion here to strike the last point on the committee charge and create an ad hoc committee that takes care of the newsletter, social media, and website.
Second.
Okay, the motion to strike has been heard and seconded. I'm just going to bold what we would be taking out right now. Is there any objection to moving to vote on that amendment?
I know that I just seconded that movement, and I don't necessarily have an objection per se, but just something that we'll want to consider is, it just occurred to me that some of our committees are already sort of thin, and essentially curious about our ability to staff another committee like that.
So it would certainly rely on some folks agreeing to be on more than one committee. I will say that. Although, as our helpful staff advisor pointed out to me, not all the committee could be made up of folks who are not members of the assembly. We can put non-assembly members on most of the committees, not all of them, but most of them. So, Tamara.
If this is a committee that is made up of non-representatives, do there need to be representatives on it? Does there need to be at least one representative member? Does the chair have to be a representative? Like, what are the rules around that?
So the bylaws say that you can have non-members on the committee, but they're not allowed to vote on the committee. So I would think we would have to have at least one voting member of the assembly on the committee in case there were committee votes to be taken. But other than that, the bylaws don't specify.
An ad hoc committee does not have to have votes on anything if it's operational.
That's true. Right. I don't foresee there being a lot of votes on the put together the newsletter committee. So yeah. Misty.
Another point of information. So I'm sorry, I'm new, so I don't know the background, but I know that Edie was mentioning there used to be like a PR type of position that we don't have any longer. So I don't know why we don't have that, but also just the question in terms of like, I know we pay to have a note taker, and it does seem if like updating the website, having social media, and distributing a newsletter seem to be something that is perhaps one of the more important things we can do to communicate with our constituents. I mean, can we consider, a modest payment for someone who helps facilitate those things?
So I can answer the first part of your question. The reason we don't have a VPPR anymore is because we went through a massive restructuring of the executive team last year in response to some concerns that were raised about how we paid people and things like that. So that is a constitutional change that happened when we accepted the new constitution. The budget of the graduate student government is to be used at the discretion of the assembly. So if the assembly wanted to hire someone to do those things, it would be the assembly's right to, in consultation with the Budget and Finance Committee and the VPFA, to come up with how we would fund that. So if there are no, Tamara.
Sorry about that. So I want to kind of second what Misty just said, just because, so I've worked in public relations before, and it is kind of intensive, even when you don't expect it to be. It's one thing if it's just a newsletter that you're throwing together, committee of people. When you're actually running social media, assumably this is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then also a website. First of all, that can entail some very specific skills. So I don't know, the way or what platform is hosting the GSG website. Assumably it is WordPress. I know that's really popular with institutions, but I think it is something important to consider that this might be a position that might be better filled by a paid professional or someone with very specific experience.
Okay. In that case, we have a motion to amend the Student Affairs Committee charge to delete the last line to create and distribute the monthly issue of the GSG newsletter. So unless there are any objections to moving to vote that remain, which I see none, you will vote yes if you want to remove that from the portfolio of the Student Affairs Committee, no if you would not like to remove it from the portfolio, and abstain if you would like to abstain. You would vote coffee cup for abstention. And with time expiring, the yeas are 15, the abstentions are 17, which means the motion is not agreed to. So are there any other questions, comments, concerns, additions or subtractions for the Student Affairs Committee? Nate.
Just that personally, I think it's difficult to vote on striking that if we don't have any sort of backup plan as to how we're going to accomplish that. As I understand, a lot of people see that as a very critical piece of GSG that needs to be done, though we didn't necessarily develop or decide on a backup plan if we were to strike this from that section.
Yes, and I will say that if we want to create that plan and introduce it at the next meeting, we could certainly propose a plan at the next meeting, and then this would sort of just fall away as a part of the duties of the Student Affairs Committee by action of the Assembly. So, Valerie.
That was actually what I was going to propose, but you beat me to it, so never mind.
Excellent. Yehuda.
In the interest of time, I was going to ask if we can move to approve the rest of the committee charges by unanimous consent, unless there's some very specific thing that people object to.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the local and civic engagement, academic affairs, and international student affairs committees charges by unanimous consent. Is there a second?
I will second that.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to approving those three committees' charges? Hearing no objection, the three charges are agreed to by unanimous consent. Excellent. Our next order of business is GSG A40A03, an act to clarify parliamentary procedure. Without objection, I will enter the entirety of the resolution into the record. Hearing no objection, it is so entered. Would the author of the resolution like to say anything to introduce it?
Yehuda Katz, computer science and previous GSG parliamentarian. I wrote this resolution just to clarify the, I'm sorry for the background noise, to clarify the Robert's Rules of Order directly into the GSG bylaws, since we've debated many times the format of the minutes, and it shouldn't be necessary to spend that much time debating the minutes. So this is the way Robert's Rules says the minutes should be done. In the future, people can amend it if we want to change the way we do the minutes, but this would be the simplest form. And again, I'm sorry about the background noise. Hopefully you could hear that.
Yep, we heard it, I think, just fine. With that, I'll open debate on GSG A40A03. Nate.
Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health. I'm just wondering if we can get the resolution up on the shared screen.
Is it not being shared? Okay, let me share it.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And this is, you should have the resolution also in your emails if you want to look at it in some way that I haven't scrolled to.
Simon, if you double click the home word tab at the top, it'll make the screen bigger and people will be able to see the whole thing.
Ooh, look at that, fancy. Okay, Autumn.
Okay, Autumn, GBBT. Point of information and clarification is necessary. Are we defined as a public body? So were we established under the university, or was GSG established by students organizing?
It is my belief that we do not count under Maryland law as a public body. That is not, I'm not a lawyer. And so I can't speak to that entirely, but based off of my reading, we do not count as a public body. And if you want to explain why that's a relevant question, you're free to, Autumn.
Okay, so I will explain, Simon, just to further, because I did email Zach and ask for clarification on this, and his clarification was a little, we'll say, ambiguous. So if we're defined as a public body, we have to follow Maryland's open subject law, which means it will be problematic with this act the way it's introduced if we are defined as a public body under Maryland state law, which Simon says we may not be. Zach says we may not be as well. It depends on how we were organized originally, which I don't have the information on that. But if we are a public body under Maryland state law, we are actually required to keep recordings. So that would be in contention with this act that has been introduced. Thank you.
Yehuda.
So I've done a bit of research myself on that also, and the University Senate has similar rules, I believe, about recording, and if they're able to not keep recordings, then we definitely don't have to, and their minutes rules are definitely similar to ours, where they do not keep minutes of what people say. If you look at the minutes, they're pretty concise. You know, you could fit the minutes of a multi-hour Senate meeting onto one page sometimes.
Autumn.
Autumn, GBBT. The Senate is actually under the Open Body Act, so they do have to keep recordings except on committees. So that was kind of my concern with this, is that the Senate is doing it and they're required to, but yet we may not be. So I think that's just a point of clarification that's necessary to keep in mind, that the Senate does require recordings to be kept except for committees.
So I want to clarify that a little bit. I don't think that the Senate is required to record. I think if they record, they're not allowed to destroy. And if folks are looking at the resolution, there is a part in 27D that says that once the minutes of the meeting have been taken, they are then, the recordings of the meetings are then destroyed. So that, I think, is the relevant question. So there is a difference between recording in the first place and keeping the recording.
So I wanted to clarify that the intent of the recording provision is that it's for the personal use of the note taker only.
Right.
It's not an official record. Historically, the GSG did not allow recordings of meetings ever. It was only in the last maybe 3 years when we were unable to find competent note takers, and that's not any jab at any specific note taker, but we used to have live note taking, and then we couldn't find people who could do that, so we allowed recording the meetings for the note takers' use only.
Okay. Nate.
Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health. I'm going to echo, I think we probably touched on this before in a separate meeting, perhaps before some individuals were on GSG, but nonetheless, given the state that we're in, and also we're live streaming things so that people can view them, I personally don't see an issue with recording things. It's something that we can do. And just because we have done it differently in the past, I don't think that necessarily means we should not do something different moving forward. So I don't see an issue with having recordings. And I don't know why we wouldn't do them, as it's something that's available to us.
Yehuda?
So this resolution is written based on Robert's rules and other standard parliamentary procedure. And if someone wanted to introduce a resolution to provide for standard recordings of meetings, that would be fine. But this resolution specifically is about Robert's rules and standard parliamentary procedure.
Okay. Autumn.
Autumn, GVBT. Point of clarification. So based on 2.7E, our YouTube recordings would have to get destroyed after the note taker took notes, correct?
My understanding is that you, when you stream to YouTube, there's an option for whether the recording is visible after the stream ends, and we would just have to uncheck the option I think that might even be the default. I'm not 100% sure. So the recording, streaming to YouTube doesn't automatically make that a recording of the meeting.
Autumn.
Okay, so this is a point of concern, and I agree with you, Kuda, that these match the bylaws currently as they are stated. We've gone over them several times. My concern is transparency to our constituents, and if we're deleting recordings, so if someone can't lively be there, they may not be able to review the information that we have, and this is a way that would say that we are destroying that and preventing our constituents from seeing what we're engaged in. That's it.
Tamara.
I want to just piggyback on Autumn's point and ask, besides, that this is the standard way to do things with Robert rules, besides, kind of more of the bureaucratic aspect of this is how it's been done. What is a more reason for all of us that we should be concerned that these recordings are out there or that they are up on YouTube? Because my understanding is that this is a great way for my constituents to see these meetings if they can't access them, maybe if they're not aware of them, maybe even in the future if they're interested in being on GSG and replacing me at some point in time, hopefully in the far off future. So I guess I'm looking for more clarification on why this would be beneficial to this body to not have these recordings permanently on the internet.
Okay. Nate.
Nate Woodard, Behavioral and Community Health. I think that pretty much sums it up, in my opinion. I think it is beneficial to those who would like to see, and I see no issue with doing it. And also just want to add that if we are broadcasting them to YouTube, there's nothing preventing individuals on YouTube from recording them and distributing them regardless. And so I think we have limited ability to do that in that way, to monitor that or to track that at all. Right. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yehuda.
So there's nothing preventing people from making their own recordings of the meetings necessarily, assuming obviously all party consent, and all kinds of other state law type stuff like that. But the major issue with having an official record of the meeting is that when you have minutes, there's a provision to allow people to clarify things in the minutes, modify the minutes. I won't say necessarily, sometimes correct the minutes. And to give people the opportunity to, to do that, to invoke that right to correct or modify the minutes. This is sort of how you have to do it. You can't release two different official versions of what happened at the meeting. And if minutes are the official version, and this is the prescribed way that minutes are done, absent some resolution to the contrary, then you can't release two different versions. Also, even if we don't approve this resolution, this is still accurate. This is the way it has to be unless someone produces a resolution to the contrary, because this is what Robert's rules says, and we operate under Robert's rules. This is just here for convenience.
Laura.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I might just be hitting on a very minute point here, but what I see in 2.7D is saying that the note taker could request to record the meeting so that they can make the notes, and then they have to destroy their personal recording. That's not saying that we can't, the meeting can't be recorded generally, and then we'd have to destroy that one. So I'm not necessarily understanding a lot of the debate right now. The other thing is, as far as I'm aware, the last 2 years I was on GSG before we went virtual, it wasn't recorded beyond just having so that note taker could take notes. Like, we wouldn't post a recording of the meeting. People would either have to come or they'd read the minutes to see what we did. So if we want to in the future record every meeting so that constituents can see it and live stream it to YouTube, I know we're doing that now, I think, so that it's open. But if once, hopefully, we're able to meet back in person, I think we then have to introduce another act or resolution to actually record that meeting to then be kept for, posterity so that people can view it. That's kind of my understanding of everything. I don't know if That's incorrect. So that's just what I wanted to say.
I will, just on your point about 27D, there is also 27E, which says that we can't post the recordings on YouTube, essentially, after the live stream is over. So just as a clarification. Tamara.
So I guess what I'm hearing from Yehuda, I just wanted to summarize, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that your concern about a recording in the future, say for example, if we did want to, I don't know, maybe amend this and I don't know, change it so that, you know, this doesn't reflect an inability to record to YouTube, is that you couldn't make clarifications to anything that happens in the recording? Is that your concern?
That's one concern.
That's one concern. I think I feel like this kind of reflects the difference between like the purpose of a recording, which would be, you know, access for our constituents versus minutes. And furthermore, I feel like, you know, if you did have a constituent who was concerned about something you said, I would assume that they would reach out to you and you could clarify to them directly. So I guess that was the point I wanted to make.
Autumn?
I did want to just point out the 2.7E to Laura. And then I also wanted to, you know, you guys talked about this in depth on June 30th, and there was this real tension between transcripts versus minutes. And I think it's important to denote that our note taker, regardless if they give us transcripts and minutes, which we could, you know, introduce an amendment to do so, is paid the same amount. So we could have the transcripts, we can have the recording. We just have to introduce an amendment to do so. This is just clarifying the current state based on the bylaws.
Alec.
I was just going to do a motion to vote.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to a vote on GSG A40A03? Seeing none. Edie, I believe we have a poll for this one. You can vote yes, no, or abstain. I'll leave the voting open for 30 seconds. With time expiring, the yeses are 14, the noes are 6, and the abstentions are 16.
It needs a 2/3 majority of votes cast.
Right. That's why I was just doing the math in my head. 2/3 majority.
12 and 6 would be a 2/3 majority.
Right. Yep. So in that case, the motion is agreed to. Okay. For our next resolution, we need to move into executive session in order to consider the release of a resolution that was passed and created under executive session. What executive session means is that we will stop the live stream to YouTube. We will ask anyone who is not an elected member of the graduate student government, including our friends from the Diamondback, to enter a waiting room or a breakout room that I believe Edie is creating. That way we can consider something in which only elected GSG members are privy to the discussion. So Edie, am I correct about the fact that we created a breakout room? Or put them back in the waiting room?
Yeah.
Okay, and we have stopped the live stream?
1 second.